Hey everyone, Elena here. At my promotion dinner, my family demanded my salary, so I cut them off mid-meal. The heart's eyes brings you stories that prove patience can be more powerful than anger. If you're here for real-life twists that leave people speechless, make sure you're subscribed and don't forget to press the bell icon. Let's begin the story. The restaurant sparkled like a reward I had chased for years. Floor-to-ceiling windows, dim golden lights, and a table booked under my name to celebrate my promotion. This night was supposed to mean something. I thought my family would finally be proud. But something felt off. My parents kept exchanging glances, their smiles stiff, like they were waiting for the right moment. My sister barely spoke, just tapping on her phone, until my father suddenly leaned in. His voice dropped, serious. Now that you're making real money, it's time you start supporting the family properly. My mother nodded instantly. Then my sister added, "We already planned how your salary should be split." I froze, thinking it had to be a joke. It wasn't. They had exact numbers, percentages, expectations. In that moment, my promotion stopped feeling like success and started feeling like a transaction. I didn't get that promotion by luck. I earned every inch of it. For years, I was the one staying late at the office while everyone else went home, the one fixing problems no one else wanted to touch, the one who said yes when others said no. My phone never stopped buzzing, even on weekends, and I got used to eating dinner at my desk more often than at home. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't easy, but it was mine. What made it harder was that I wasn't just working for myself. My family had been depending on me financially long before this promotion came through. It started small, covering a bill here, helping with groceries there, but over time it became expected. My parents stopped asking and started assuming. My sister never even pretended to feel bad about it. To them, I wasn't just a daughter or a sibling anymore. I was the solution. Still, I told myself it was temporary, that once things got better, they'd stand on their own again, that this promotion would change everything, not just for me, but for all of us. Maybe they'd finally see how much I had sacrificed. Maybe they'd be proud. That's why I planned the dinner. Not to show off, but to share the moment with them, to celebrate together like a real family should. I chose the restaurant carefully, making sure it was somewhere special but not over the top, somewhere that felt like a milestone without turning it into a spectacle. I made the reservation a week in advance, adjusted my schedule, and even sent a reminder in the family group chat so no one would forget. For once, I wanted everything to go smoothly. No stress, no last-minute problems, just one normal night where we could sit together and enjoy something good. When they arrived, I noticed it immediately. The energy felt off. My mother hugged me, but it was quick, distracted. My father shook my hand instead of pulling me in like he usually did. My sister barely looked up from her phone before sitting down. I brushed it off, telling myself I was overthinking. Maybe they were just tired. Maybe I was expecting too much from a simple dinner. We ordered food, made small talk, and for a moment, it almost felt normal. But every time I mentioned the promotion, the long hours, or what it meant to me, the conversation shifted, redirected, avoided. It was subtle, but I felt it, like they weren't interested in how I got here, only in what came next. I didn't realize then that they weren't celebrating me. They were waiting for something entirely else. The shift happened so quietly, I almost missed it. One second, we were passing menus and discussing appetizers, and the next, the tone at the table changed. It wasn't anything obvious, no raised voices or dramatic gestures, but something underneath it all tightened. My father leaned back in his chair, studying me in a way that felt less like pride and more like calculation. My mother folded her hands neatly on the table, her posture straight, composed, almost rehearsed. "So," my father began casually, though his voice carried a weight that didn't match the word, "this promotion, It comes with a significant raise, right? I nodded, still smiling, though it felt slightly forced now. Yeah, it does. It's a big step up. That's good, my mother added quickly. Really good. We've all been waiting for this. Something about the way she said we made my stomach tighten. Before I could respond, my sister finally put down her phone and leaned forward. So what's the number? She asked, like she was asking about the price of something she planned to buy. I hesitated, not because I was ashamed, but because the question felt wrong, too direct, too entitled. I said, "It's comfortable, enough to cover everything I need and save." "That's not what she asked," my father said, his tone sharpening just slightly. "We're family. There's no reason to be vague." The air at the table shifted again, heavier this time. I could feel it pressing against my chest. "I just got the promotion," I said, trying to keep things light. "I haven't even fully processed it yet." But they weren't listening. Not really. They were watching me, waiting. And for the first time that night, I started to realize this dinner wasn't about celebrating anything. It was about something entirely else. My father didn't let it go. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice like he was about to say something reasonable, something that would make everything feel normal again. "Look," he said, "we're not asking for anything unreasonable. We just think it's time things become structured." "Structured?" I repeated, the word feeling strange in my mouth. My mother nodded quickly, almost relieved he had said it first. "You've been helping us for a while now, and we appreciate that. We really do. But this promotion changes things. It means you can do more for the family." There it was again, that word, family. But it didn't feel warm or supportive the way it used to. It felt like pressure. My sister reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She slid it across the table toward me with a small, almost excited smile. "We actually thought this through, so it's fair for everyone." I stared at the paper but didn't touch it right away. My chest felt tight again, tighter than before. Slowly, I unfolded it. Numbers, percentages, allocations, a breakdown of my future salary, how much would go to my parents' living expenses, how much toward my sister's future plans, a fixed monthly contribution labeled as family support, as if it were a bill I had already agreed to. "You made a budget for my income?" I asked, my voice quieter now. "It's not just your income," my father said firmly. "It's family income. We all benefit." I looked up at them, one by one. None of them looked unsure. None of them looked guilty. They looked certain. Like this was normal. Like this was already decided. And that's when something inside me stopped trying to understand and started paying attention. I read the paper again, slower this time, hoping I had misunderstood something. Maybe it wasn't as bad as it looked. Maybe I was overreacting. But the numbers didn't change. 40% to my parents, 20% set aside for my sister's future plans, a fixed monthly contribution labeled as family support, as if it were a bill I had already agreed to. "You made a budget for my income?" I asked, my voice quieter now. "It's not just your income," my father said firmly. "It's family income. We all benefit." I looked up at them, one by one. None of them looked unsure. None of them looked guilty. They looked certain. Like this was normal. Like this was already decided. And that's when something inside me stopped trying to understand and started paying attention. My father didn't let it go. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice like he was about to say something reasonable, something that would make everything feel normal again. "Look," he said, "we're not asking for anything unreasonable. We just think it's time things become structured." "Structured?" I repeated, the word feeling strange in my mouth. My mother nodded quickly, almost relieved he had said it first. You've been helping us for a while now, and we appreciate that. We really do. But this promotion changes things. It means you can do more for the family." There it was again, that word, family. But it didn't feel warm or supportive the way it used to. It felt like pressure. My sister reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She slid it across the table toward me with a small, almost excited smile. "We actually thought this through," she said, "so it's fair for everyone." I stared at the paper but didn't touch it right away. My chest felt tight again, tighter than before. Slowly, I unfolded it. Numbers. Percentages. Allocations. A breakdown of my future salary, how much would go to my parents' living expenses, how much toward my sister's plans, how much I was expected to contribute monthly moving forward. It was detailed, careful, planned. "You made a budget for my income?" I asked, my voice quieter now. "It's not just your income," my father said firmly. "It's family income. We all benefit." I looked up at them, one by one. None of them looked unsure. None of them looked guilty. They looked certain. Like this was normal. Like this was already decided. And that's when something inside me stopped trying to understand and started paying attention. I read the paper again, slower this time, hoping I had misunderstood something. Maybe it wasn't as bad as it looked. Maybe I was overreacting. But the numbers didn't change. 40% to my parents, 20% set aside for my sister's future plans, a fixed monthly contribution labeled as family support, as if it were a bill I had already agreed to pay. "This isn't real," I said, placing the paper back on the table. "You're joking." No one laughed. My mother sighed softly, like I was the one making things difficult. "We're trying to be practical," she said. "This way, there's no confusion later." "Confusion about what?" I asked, my voice tightening despite my effort to stay calm. "About how much of my salary belongs to me?" My father's expression hardened. "Don't twist it like that. We've supported you your whole life. Everything you are is because of this family." I stared at him, the words hitting harder than I expected. Supported me? I had been the one paying their bills for months, covering expenses they didn't even acknowledge anymore, and now they were framing it like I owed them more. "You're not thinking long term," my sister added, crossing her arms. "This is about stability for all of us." "For all of us," I repeated quietly. But what I heard was something else entirely. Not support, not love, control. I looked around the table, the expensive plates, the untouched food, a family I thought I knew, and felt something shift deep inside me. Not anger, not yet. Clarity. Because in that moment, I understood exactly what this dinner was. It wasn't a celebration, it was a negotiation, and I hadn't agreed to the terms. I took a deep breath and pushed the paper away. My hands were shaking slightly, but for the first time all night, it wasn't fear. It was resolve. I looked at them, the faces that had raised me, guided me, and now expected to control me, and I realized something crucial. I wasn't a child anymore. I didn't owe them obedience. I didn't owe them my salary, my life, or my freedom. Not after this. Not ever again. The restaurant felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. My father opened his mouth to speak, probably to remind me of my responsibilities, but I raised a hand. "Stop," I said firmly. The table fell silent. My mother's smile twitched. My sister blinked rapidly. "No," I continued, my voice steady. "I've supported this family for years. I've paid bills, covered expenses, and made sure we never went without. And now, this? You're treating my success like it belongs to you before I've even earned it. That ends tonight." I reached for my phone, keeping my eyes on them, letting the moment hang. I opened my banking app, scrolling quickly, quietly, deliberately. Automatic transfers, utilities, savings, the allowance I had been giving them. Everything. It was all set up to stop immediately. No fanfare, no announcements, just control returning to its rightful owner. My father's eyes widened first. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My sister froze, staring at me like she didn't recognize the person in front of her. I didn't flinch. I didn't apologize. I didn't explain. I just tapped the final confirmation. And with that, everything changed. I wasn't just a passive participant anymore. I was in charge. And for the first time in years, they realized that I could, if I chose, turn the tables completely. The tension was thick, almost tangible, but I felt lighter than I had in months. For the first time, I wasn't being pulled into their narrative. I was writing my own. The silence stretched long enough for the reality to sink in. My parents weren't sure what to say. My sister's jaw was tight, her hands gripping the edge of the table. It was as if the weight of all the years of dependence, all the unspoken expectations, had landed squarely on them. I didn't break eye contact. I didn't flinch. I let them feel it. "You think this is dramatic?" I asked quietly, letting the words settle over the table like a cold wave. "This is reality. You planned my money before I even got it. You've spent years depending on me without ever saying thank you, without ever considering how it feels to work nonstop to make sacrifices you'll never understand. And now, this? You're treating my success like it belongs to you before I've even earned it. That ends tonight." My kamea grew firmer with each word. "No, not anymore." I could see it in their faces, the shift from smug certainty to genuine concern. My father's shoulders slumped, my mother's eyes watered, and my sister finally really looked at me for the first time all night. They realized I wasn't bluffing, that the quiet strength I'd been building through years of work, sacrifice, and patience had finally reached a breaking point. I continued, deliberately slow, letting them absorb every word. "From now on, you are responsible for yourselves, your bills, your expenses, your choices. I will no longer be the safety net. You've tested my patience for too long. I am done being the one who covers for your mistakes, your lack of planning, and your sense of entitlement." And with that, I knew it. The night had turned. The power balance had shifted. I wasn't their child to control. I wasn't their bank to exploit. I was my own person, finally standing on equal footing, and this was the first step towards forcing them to understand that lesson, painfully, but clearly. The rest of the evening unfolded differently than anyone could have anticipated. My parents tried to argue, to reason, even to guilt me into doing the right thing, but I didn't respond. I simply stayed calm, letting the reality of their situation settle in. Their faces, once confident and entitled, now reflected shock, disbelief, and, slowly, a creeping fear. For the first time, they were on the other side, vulnerable, dependent, and forced to reckon with their choices. I could see my sister whispering to them, trying to salvage some control, but it was too late. The shift had happened, and there was no reversing it. Every text, every call, every shared expense I had previously covered was now halted. Every automatic transfer I had allowed flowed back into my hands. The accounts were frozen, the allowances canceled, and the strings they had pulled for years were suddenly gone. I leaned back in my chair, a quiet calm settling over me. I wasn't cruel, I wasn't angry, I was resolute. I had given them years of support, and now it was time for them to stand on their own. They would have to navigate their responsibilities, learn to budget, and confront the consequences of the choices they made. And as they sat there, stunned into silence, I realized something powerful. Boundaries weren't just about protection. They were about teaching respect, responsibility, and independence. The turning point wasn't just about reclaiming my financial control. It was about finally reshaping the family dynamic for good. That night, the scales shifted. I wasn't a passive participant in their plans anymore. I was in command of my life. The days after the dinner were quiet, almost eerily so. My parents avoided calling, and my sister barely messaged. It was as if the sudden loss of control had left them speechless, and honestly, I didn't mind. I spent the first morning after the dinner in my apartment, sipping coffee and scrolling through work emails, feeling a strange mixture of relief and satisfaction. The weight I had carried for years, covering bills, managing expectations, keeping peace, was finally lifted. By the second day, the reality of their situation started to sink in. My mother called briefly, her voice trembling. "Vanessa, we didn't—" I interrupted politely but firmly. "I know, but the outcome doesn't change. You need to figure out your responsibilities." There was a long pause on the line before she quietly hung up. I didn't push. That was the point. They had to confront this themselves. Meanwhile, my father reached out to try a different approach. He suggested meeting to work out a plan. I considered it for a moment, then shook my head. No. The plan had been set at the dinner table. I wasn't negotiating. I wasn't stepping back. They had to navigate this. I had given them every opportunity over the years to act responsibly. Now it was time for them to act. Even my sister, the youngest, began to grasp the consequences. She texted asking questions about budgeting, job applications, and what the real cost of living looked like. It was a humbling moment for them all. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about money. It was about accountability, independence, and learning the lesson they had ignored for too long. The dynamics had shifted. I had reclaimed my space, my time, and my life. And now it was time for them to learn what responsibility truly meant. By the end of the first week, the consequences became unavoidable. My parents had to confront reality. Their expenses hadn't disappeared just because I stopped covering them. Utility bills piled up, overdue notices arrived, and the urgency of their situation became impossible to ignore. For years, they had leaned on me without effort, but now the safety net was gone. They were forced to adapt or face real consequences. My father, who had always carried an air of authority, found himself making calls he had never imagined, applying for part-time work, checking job boards, figuring out how to make ends meet. He came home exhausted, frustrated, and for the first time, truly humbled. My mother, who had often delegated all responsibility to me, had to learn basic budgeting, grocery shopping, and managing bills. Simple tasks I had handled for them now became their daily reality. My sister, though younger, was affected too. She watched my parents struggle, realizing that life isn't a series of favors to be taken for granted. She approached me one evening, quietly, asking for advice. Not money, not solutions, but guidance on how to navigate real-world responsibilities. It was a subtle shift, but a meaningful one. I answered calmly, teaching me what I could, but never taking control. The lesson had to be theirs to internalize. I felt a sense of calm during this process. For the first time in years, I wasn't the caregiver, the accountant, or the enabler. I was just me. My parents were learning the hard way, but I knew this would be more valuable than anything I could hand them financially. Boundaries had been set, respect had been reestablished, and for the first time, the balance of our relationship felt fair. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, the transformation became real. My parents adapted to their new reality. My father found steady part-time work at a hardware store, while my mother picked up shifts at a local grocery chain. It wasn't glamorous, and it certainly wasn't the lifestyle they had grown accustomed to, but it was theirs, and for the first time, earned. Their confidence grew incrementally, built on responsibility rather than dependence. My sister also began to shift. She started budgeting, contributing in small ways, and even taking on freelance work to support herself. The dynamic between us changed completely. No more entitlement, no more expectations that I would cover for their choices. Conversations about money were now practical, calm, and grounded in reality. Reality rather than manipulation. As for me, I felt lighter than I had in years. I had reclaimed not just my finances, but my autonomy, my peace, and my boundaries. The tension that had hung over every family gathering dissipated. We could interact as a real family rather than a transactional unit. The lesson was clear. Independence is painful, but necessary. Support is meaningful, but only when it is earned and appreciated. And boundaries aren't cruelty. They are protection, guidance, and respect for everyone involved. 4 months after that pivotal dinner, we met again, this time at a small, modest Italian restaurant. No grand gestures, no expensive bakery cake, just genuine conversation and shared laughs. My parents even surprised me with a small card and a check from their own earnings, a humble gesture, but one that meant more than any lavish gift ever could. We were family again, but now on fair terms, with respect, responsibility, and independence intact. Looking back, I realized the dinner that night wasn't just about money or control. It was a wake-up call for all of us. My family had grown comfortable with dependence, mistaking my support for weakness, and I had allowed it to continue for too long. The eviction of my own finances and the firm boundaries I set wasn't cruelty. It was the push they needed to face reality. For the first time, they experienced the consequences of their choices, and that was more powerful than any lecture or argument I could have delivered. I also learned something important about myself. I discovered the strength I had been quietly building for years, the patience, the resilience, and the courage to stand firm even when it meant creating discomfort for the people I loved most. I realized that love doesn't always mean giving endlessly. Sometimes love means saying no, setting limits, and teaching accountability. By reclaiming my power, I didn't just protect myself. I gave them an opportunity to grow, to rebuild, and to earn the respect they had taken for granted. Even the smallest gestures now carry weight. A check given from their own earnings, a shared meal without financial expectation, a conversation grounded in mutual respect. These are the things that show real change. The family I once knew still exists, but it's different now. Healthier, fairer, more honest. And I finally feel like we can move forward without resentment, entitlement, or manipulation. The transformation didn't happen overnight, and it certainly wasn't easy. My parents had to face the reality of work, budgeting, and responsibility for the first time in decades. My sister had to understand that life isn't about taking for granted what's given freely. And I had to maintain the strength to hold boundaries, even when guilt and family pressure tugged at me relentlessly. But through it all, something remarkable happened. Respect was rebuilt. Not forced, not superficial, but genuine. Now, when we gather as a family, it feels different. Conversations flow without tension, and there's a sense of equality in our interactions. They've learned the value of independence, and I've learned the importance of standing firm, even with those I love most. The lessons of responsibility, boundaries, and accountability have become part of who we are, shaping not just our relationships, but our individual growth as well. Looking back, I'm grateful for the pain, the tension, and the challenge. It forced clarity and action. It reminded me that sometimes doing the hard thing is the kindest thing you can do for yourself and for others. True family isn't defined by blind dependence or entitlement. It's defined by respect, fairness, and the willingness to grow together, even when it's uncomfortable. We're still family, but now it's a family built on honesty, effort, and earned trust. And that makes every victory, every lesson, and every shared moment far more meaningful than it ever was before.